Okay. Tasha, looks like we're streaming.
Yes, we're streaming. I have so many windows open, so I thought I was unmuted. Yeah, we're streaming live on YouTube now.
Okay, that's great. So we've still got some community board, transportation committee members who are joining. Let's just give folks one more minute. And thanks to our presenters for being on. And it looks like we have a bunch of folks from the community as well, which is great. Okay, let's just give it one more minute. Thank you. I'll kind of take that as a cue. So hello everyone, Katie Walsh, I'm the chair of transportation for CB7. John DeLuper is our vice chair. Just want to recognize we have the chair of Community Board 7 on as well, Julio Pena. And I would like to ask, I think, Maria or Natasha, if you could help us with roll call. Thank you.
Yes, I will take care of that. Transportation committee members, I will be calling you. When you hear me announce your name, just please unmute yourself, say present or here, and then mute yourself again. Okay, starting with Katie Walsh.
Present.
Thank you. Next is John DeLuper.
Present.
Thank you. Next is Sandra Alfonso.
Present.
Thank you. Next is Joan Body.
Here.
Thank you. Joseph Canali. Joseph Canali. Okay, next, Jerry Chan.
Present.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. Next, David Estrada. David. Next, Diana Gonzalez. Diana Gonzalez. Next, Zachary JC. Zachary JC. Roberto A. Martinez.
I'm present.
Thank you. Next, Marilyn Melman. Marilyn Melman. Next, Gabino Morales. Gabino Morales. Next, Samuel Sierra.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you, Sam. Next, Cindy Vanden Bosch. Cindy? And the other board members who are here who are not on the committee, you will be acknowledged. Thank you.
We also have to call Julio Pena. He's on the list.
Oh, Julio Pena, our chair.
Here. Thank you, Natasha, Maria.
Thank you, Julio. Roll call is done for the committee.
Okay, thank you so much, Natasha and Maria, as always. And okay, so we have two agenda items for tonight for transportation. We will have a presentation, short discussion with folks. There's several representatives here, so I think Stacy, I might call on you to invite us to let us know who's going to be speaking, but from the Link NYC presentation. And then the second is on loading zones. If someone is joining, if you can just make sure you're on mute. Thank you. And then we'll go into a discussion on loading zones. We do not have New York City DOT here. I can talk a little bit more about that for context, but that'll be the second part of the discussion. So let me turn it over to Lincoln YC, and if you have a presentation.
Yeah, hi. Please bear with me. I'm getting over the dregs of COVID. So sometimes I'll have to cough a little, but thank you so much for inviting us. The reason I believe we were invited tonight was because I had sent a letter around a couple weeks ago indicating that there were new proposed locations for Link NYC in this district. So what I'll do is I'll give a general overview. I'm going to turn it over to Rob Zakota from the City Bridge team to go through each of those sites, and then we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So my name is Stacy Gardner. I'm the Senior Director of External Affairs for the Office of Technology and Innovation. We're the city agency that oversees this program. And with me is Brett Sykoff. He is our Executive Director for Franchise Administration, and he'll be on with us in a second. And on the City Bridge side, there's Rob Zakota, the President of Wireless at City Bridge, and Margot Nee, who is General Counsel for City Bridge. Is that correct, Margot? Did I get your title correct?
Yes, in addition to that, I also oversee external affairs so that nobody is alarmed by the presence of an attorney. It is just coincidence.
Yeah, great. So we got a full team here to answer any questions you have. Yeah, just to give you guys an overview, you already have Link NYC in your district, so you're probably familiar with the original design of it, which was around 10-foot tall kiosks that replace payphones along commercial corridors. They have free high-speed Wi-Fi, free nationwide calling, mobile device charging, a dedicated 911 button, a tablet to access city services, and maps, and the advertising screens, not just for regular ads, but for community content, agency PSAs, a lot of other types of dynamic content, including news alerts and bus times, stuff like that. So those have been out there for a few years. More recently, we amended our contract to include to redesign the Link NYC kiosk to include space at the top for wireless technology to enhance all the mobile networks in a given area. So we had gone through this whole process where we amended the contract through the Franchise and Concession Review Committee. Then after that, we went to the Public Design Commission with a new design. We got approval on that for commercial corridors in late 2021. And then mid last year, we got limited approval for residential areas as well. What we're talking about today are I believe 3 sites that are in a manufacturing district that would not have advertising screens. I'll leave it to Rob to kind of go through that. The process that we have is when we find a viable site for Link NYC kiosk, we are vetting it for over 100 siting criteria. So that means it can't be they can't be too close to each other. They can't be too close to a fire hydrant, a tree pit, a curb cut. It can't interfere with the line of sight in the roadway. It has to leave enough space on the sidewalk for pedestrian flow. So all of those things must be measured. So City Bridge measures them, then we measure them, and then we bring it out to the community to get feedback from folks like yourself and elected officials and the general public to see, you know, what kind of context is going on the ground. You know, sometimes we're looking at this like from our computer screen. It's really good to hear from the people who live in the community and who work in the community, who know the streets better than anybody. So that's why we do this process. And as I said, they're proposed. So we did all those measurements and everything. We think it's a viable site. Sometimes they don't work out for various reasons. You know, sometimes once the shovel goes in the ground, there's something under there that we can't touch, or something else popped up on the sidewalk in the meantime. So we have to either adjust the site a little bit, or we just move on from it completely. So we're at an early stage, and we're in a you know, an information gathering stage as it relates specifically to these sites. So I can turn it over to Rob if you want to run through each of the ones that we have proposed currently in Community Board 7.
Sure. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you to members of the Community Board for taking the time to listen to our presentation tonight about the sites we're proposing in Brooklyn Community District 7. Just going to turn it over to Margot Nee, my colleague, just for a few minutes, say a couple words about our program, and then I'll go through the maps and some of the sites so you can see exactly where we're talking about. Margot.
Thank you, Rob, and good to meet all of you. Thank you for making time to meet with us tonight. Rob is going to show you the 3 sites that are proposed for this district. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you a little bit more background in addition to what Stacy already said. So as a reminder, we're CityBridge. We operate the Link NYC network. We are the vendor for the Office of Technology and Innovation, and we have been the vendor since 2015. Originally, when this franchise came into existence, our goal was to remove all of the old public payphones that were around the city. There were about 7,000 at the time. As you can probably appreciate, they were not in very good condition. They were considered to be street clutter. And the city and CityBridge really wanted to remove them and replace them with something state-of-the-art that would bring Wi-Fi to areas that don't otherwise have it. And that's really remained the principal goal of the program. Since 2015, we have removed almost all of the payphones, other than a few very special landmarked ones. And we have deployed about 2,000 links throughout the city. At the moment, we are embarking on a new product, which is called the Link 5G, which I'm sure you've seen. It's a taller version of the existing link structure. And the reason it is taller is so that it will also be 5G enabled, and it has to be that height in order to transmit 5G radio waves. The siting for the new link structures is different in the past than it was in the past. In the past, we brought links to areas primarily based on the need for Wi-Fi, and also the need for better in-home internet connections. Potentially, every link is connected to a fiber network, which allows broadband cable connections to be connected where they otherwise couldn't. But now, in addition to that, we're introducing 5G. So nowadays, when we select new sites, the sites are actually selected by telecommunications carriers who tell us what areas of the city need better cellular connections because of gaps in coverage that exist now or will soon. And that's why we have even though there are only 3 sites on the list for your community board today, there are obviously dozens other throughout the city. And there will be more in the coming years as the need for 5G and improved cellular service gets even greater. And it's expected that cellular service will get worse if we don't do things to enable 5G. The last thing I wanted to mention is that the new link structures, the new taller structures, are unique to other pieces of 5G equipment that may exist in other parts of the city or in other cities, in that they actually allow 5 different carriers to transmit 5G radio waves. So that means a Verizon, a T-Mobile, and AT&T, all up to 5 of them can transmit their signal through our 5G poles. this has the benefit of allowing us to actually deploy fewer links than would otherwise be needed. We're aware that there are concerns about the number of pieces of street furniture and a given block, and about not cluttering up sidewalks that may be too narrow. And the Link 5G actually allows that to be taken care of, because we are, again, replacing the payphones with one structure that allows 5 different carriers to bring 5G to that area. So with that, why don't we look at the 3 sites in some more detail, and then we can get to your questions. Rob, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. I guess I need to be enabled to share a screen if that would be possible.
Looking,
Give us a
Natasha?
minute. Yeah, give
Yeah.
us a minute.
Okay. And then there will be a lot of questions, so I'll just recognize, Jerry, that you'll be the first person I turn to when we get to the question section, since you have your hand up, but we'll just we'll go through these site locations, and then we'll go to questions. And then we have questions from the public too, and we'll make sure we capture those as well. So feel free to put any questions in there at the same time as you're thinking of them.
Just bear with us a moment.
Unfortunately, neither Natasha nor I have access to do that. Who allowed to?
Give me a minute. Hold on. I'm just trying to give me a minute too.
If not, perhaps we could just email you. It's only a few slides. Maybe it would be easier if we just email it over to you or to whomever has the control.
Okay.
Margot, who's giving the presentation?
Would
I
be
mean-
me, Rob Sakota.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, I will, so Natasha's still trying to go through that. I think we haven't seen the presentation yet, but why don't we just start aggregating some of the questions?
Next midwinter break. And we
Sorry, if you've just joined, if you can put yourself on mute, John, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, why don't we just capture some questions at the same time? So Jerry, we'll go to you if you want to ask your question, and then Joan, and we'll keep going through the list.
Hi, thank you. So my Jerry Jan, I'm the co-chair of the public safety. So when you guys do a site survey, I'm not just talking about Sunset Park, the future growth in the Sunset Park area. How do you determine that in the residential area that is safe to put one of those link in the neighborhoods? I'll give you an example, right? So I've been seeing link all over the city, and I also see link is about 2 to 3 story high. Those antennas is actually pointing at someone else's window. I just learned today from you that you'll be carrying all 5 networks. So that means that tower will be broadcasting a lot of radio frequency. That means if there's kids living in that apartment, they might get pretty much radioactive.
Make her
Right.
a co-host.
Okay.
So how will you guys determine that it is safe to put those in the residential neighborhood? That's my question.
Yeah, so that's good. I think I hear you. I think we heard Jeremy briefly on the phone. So kind of the safe health, like human health implications of these. So I'm gonna take that question and then go to Joan, and then we'll see where we are with slides and then open it to you guys. Go ahead, Joan.
Would he mention the sites, even though we can't see the presentation?
Yeah,
Sure.
we
I mean,
have.
Maybe it'd be helpful, I mean, when I get presentation, I can show them, but just to get an idea of where you are. Currently there's about 17 Link 1.0s. Those are the 9.5-foot kiosks in your community district, mostly located along 4th Avenue in the sort of northwest section of the community district. The 3 new kiosks that we're proposing, these are, as Margot said, the Link 5Gs, the 32-foot kiosks. They are all going to be closer to the industry city section of the community district. 2 of them are located near the entrance to Bush Terminal off of 44th Street and 43rd Street. And the 3rd one will be located further south on off of 58th Street, essentially outside the parking lot for the ferry terminal, for the New York City ferry. Actually sort of behind the Brooklyn Army Terminal. So those would be the 3 locations. At least with respect to these 3 locations, as Stacy mentioned, they're all in what are at least zoned as manufacturing areas. There are, there's not close by to any residential homes. Certainly in the future, we do intend or hope to be able to go into residential areas as well, because we think it's important to ensure that there's good both mobile phone coverage and free Wi-Fi in residential areas. But at least with respect to these 3, they're, like I said, in sort of more business manufacturing oriented types of sites.
Okay, I thank you for that. And also, if you would put in your little memory bank up here in Windsor Terrace, we are kind of a forgotten little area. So we have many beautiful homes up here, and a lot of elderly people do not have any access to any modernizations. So if you would just keep us in mind. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joan. And so it sounds like we have fixed the issue. You were projecting your screen, and if you can talk through the sites, also address the environmental health questions that were raised as you go through this. Thank you.
Sure. So going through the site, as I mentioned, so what you're looking at is a map of Brooklyn 7, Community District 7 in Brooklyn. And as I mentioned, most of the existing kiosks, which are indicated in the map in this sort of purplish square color, are located up here along 4th Avenue. The 3 new kiosks we have in the larger blue squares, as I mentioned, 2 of them are located close to the entrance of the Bush Terminal. And the 3rd site is located closer to 58th Avenue near the entrance to the ferry. So I have a slide here showing the specific locations, those being 117 42nd Street, 10 43rd Street, and 111 58th Street. Now, we've also indicated here the type of kiosks, as Margot and Stacy mentioned. The Link 5G that we're talking about looks different. It's a 32-foot structure, much larger than the 9.5-foot existing kiosk, but it comes in two different flavors. One would have an ad screen or two ad screens on it, similar to what you would see on the existing 9.5-foot structure. And one version has no ad screen on it. For at least these three installations, we're proposing to put sort of the version with the ads on them. And now I'm going to show you the actual sites. So the first of the two sites closer to Bush Terminal is a site essentially where the blue arrow is shown is where the kiosk would be located. It's backing up to a parking lot. No building at all on the street behind it currently. And there is sort of an industrial warehouse building across the street in which you can see the City Bike rack in front of that. And like I said, it's on 42nd, very close to the corner of First Avenue. The second site is actually, for those of you familiar with the area, it's actually within sort of the, I guess when you go into the Bush Terminal area, there's a little gate in the front, which I guess maybe is closed from time to time, but this is within the area. It's the site is back on 43rd Street. It's in front of a building which it looks like it was previously a restaurant, and across from a construction site. The third site is, as I mentioned, further south, right off of 58th Street, but essentially where it is right is the entry to the parking lot. If you look at the picture here in the middle and you see the vans in the middle to the left of the cat truck, that's the parking lot for the ferry terminal. And on the right, you can see, I don't know if that's the ferry or a large boat there. So the site here, again, fairly far, certainly very far from any residences, but for this site in particular is also not really close to any buildings whatsoever. You know, all of these sites, as Margot mentioned, are primarily chosen because we're looking for areas where there is either poor coverage, mobile phone coverage now, or the mobile carriers anticipate that mobile coverage is going to begin to suffer because of increasing demand shortly, and they're looking to get ahead of a problem. When you do these type of infrastructure builds, they take a considerable period of time between the planning process and by the time you actually get the site up. So if you wait for a problem to exist in terms of your mobile capacity, then in some ways you're going to have an issue for a long period of time before you can repair it. So the carrier is always looking to stay ahead of the game, because as I think most people are familiar, people's use of mobile phones and the amount of data that they're using on their mobile devices increases, every year over year, very rapidly. The sites were also chosen, especially this one, I think, in part because we are providing a free Wi-Fi service. I imagine people, either standing, sitting, or waiting at the ferry terminal are going to be able to basically use that free Wi-Fi signal for this one. So that's the slides I had to show. So I will stop sharing at this point.
Okay, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions that come up. I do not want to complicate life for Maria or Natasha, but I did want to ask if I can share my screen since we don't have any more presentations, because there's something that I wanted to be able to show, but if it's too hard, don't worry about it.
Sure, let me make you a co-host that way.
Okay.
You can then
Okay,
share your
great.
screen.
So the first question, I was just going to show what we have from the community board, but there's a discrepancy between what the information we were given, which is the Link NYC with ads or without ads. The presentation you just showed, you said they do have ads, but the email, official request from the
Katie,
Office of Technology. Yeah.
I apologize, actually, because now I'm looking at your notice and I think I have the presentation wrong, because it clearly is indicating in your notice that these are Link 5Gs without ad screens. So my mistake there.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we can double check that, because that could have been my my error when I sent it. But typically in manufacturing districts, we have not been proposing them with ads.
Okay. So the just for everyone who's here, this is the information that was sent to us that we are being asked to respond to. So Stacy, this is from your message about these are the 3 sites. It's Link 5G without the ad screens. And the request to the Community Board 7 is for us to provide comments on this as soon as possible, which is why we got this meeting scheduled. So we can send comments back by March 5th. The other thing that, so Stacy, can you just clarify, it is with ad screens or without?
I'm gonna look right now. I'll have an answer for you in just 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm fairly certain that it's without ad screen. I'm sorry,
Okay.
without ad screens.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Rob will double check that.
Okay. And then the other thing is that in some other community presentations, I'm going to open up to everybody, but in other presentations, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so just in terms of like visualizing it, I think you showed us some of the sites. I had seen this presented, I think it was, I don't know, the community board that is in Park Slope, in terms of what this is obviously Link NYC with, I'm assuming this is like with an ad, but just for folks to visualize it, because I think that's really important to kind of understand like what it is that we're talking about. And so I will stop sharing my screen, but I did just want to ask you, Rob, before we go back to questions, could you address the environmental health question that was raised earlier?
Sure.
I can start it and then I'll let you, because you know more about the radio frequency stuff, and I can I can start with kind of how we frame it. So radio frequency emissions are they are regulated by the federal government. So those are set by the FCC. So while the city doesn't, you know, come up with what those regulations are and what the emissions must be, we do keep all the franchisees accountable to actually following them. So, for example, we don't just do the Link 5G franchise. We do the franchise that allows companies to put mobile telecommunications infrastructure on existing poles. So that would be streetlights, utility poles, etc. All of those companies must have equipment that's compliant with the FCC. And through our franchise agreement, we reserve the right to test them to make sure that they stay in compliance. So that is how we tackle that. And Rob, I don't know if you wanted to get into more of like the technical piece of that, what is emitted from these and all of that.
Sure. As Stacy mentioned, that all broadcast radios used in the operation of mobile phones, whether those are radios and antennas on sites like the ones we're proposing to put in, or those that people use in their homes, are, as she says, regulated by the FCC. The FCC has maximum output limitations in terms of for safety. Generally, when these radios are working, they will not be anywhere near the FCC regulated numbers. But before any radios are allowed in any configuration to go up on any of these sites, they're going to be, the configuration will be tested to determine the RF emissions and make sure that they're well within the FCC guidelines. Now, I guess I've read certainly that there is some concern expressed in many quarters related to 5G, because 5G is sort of a new generation. It's the 5th generation of mobile phone services. At least in some quarters, I've heard people saying, well, maybe this is different, that, we've had mobile phones now for, 25 years, but, how do we know that, if we have this new 5G thing, that it's, not going to have some type of harmful effect that may not have existed in the past. The principal difference between what's going to happen in the 5G deployments versus what's happened in the past is that the 5G is going to use different frequencies, sort of higher wave frequencies. And what that means typically is that the frequencies, for the most part, go a shorter distance than frequencies that are currently used in mobile phone use, and they penetrate surfaces to a much lesser degree. So, for those of you who use your mobile phones in your homes today, you're able to use them because the signal from some broadcast point, whether that's on a building somewhere or on a street light or wherever it might be, that signal needs to reach into your home for your phone to actually work. The signals in some cases that we're putting up will do the same. But in many cases, because of the types of frequencies to be used, it frankly won't even get through the walls in some cases. But I can't definitively say one way or the other, but we certainly don't believe that this most recent generation of mobile phones would in any way be any more harmful or any different, frankly, in large respects from prior. But that said, certainly these locations, as I mentioned before, are pretty far away from, in some cases, any buildings, but certainly from residential buildings. We will be, as I said earlier, proposing sites in residential areas. We do take into account where apartments are located and where people are. We try to be smart about what we're doing. But at the same time, we also are looking to ultimately ensure that people are getting better services. And if we avoid residential neighborhoods, then we're going to leave residential neighborhoods in a place where they're going to have worse mobile phone services, and that's not a good thing. And they're not going to have access to the free Wi-Fi, which is also not a good thing. So those are our primary, concerns and drivers in terms of choosing locations, and how we're making sure that we're both ensure that we have safety for all of us, but at the same time, are putting out infrastructure that's helpful in terms of people's day-to-day needs to use wireless services.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Jerry, who asked the question. If you wanted to have a follow-up, and then anyone else with questions, if you could raise your hand. And then I do want to go, there's some questions that are coming in from the public chat. So Jerry?
Yep, thank you. So thank you for explaining how a frequency works and the radio wave and stuff. Something I learned from the 5th grade, right? But my question is, right, is if you put 5G from different networks into one area, right, and put a piece of meat on top of it, that meat is going to get radiated. If you have an antenna, right, one antenna is about 2-story high, because I've been seeing this all over the city, and the antenna is pointing to someone's house, it's going to be affected, right? This is why the previous generation, right, they put all the antennas usually on top of the roof, so it doesn't impact any houses. Do you have a study, right, showing that it is safe?
Certainly, you're correct. As we mentioned, that there are 5 radios. To the extent that someone's got their background on, it's a little hard to hear. The 5 radios, all other things being equal, are more than one radio. But the types of radios we're talking about utilizing on street poles are much lower power than something you're going to see, for example, on a pole on the on the side of a highway or even on a rooftop. The types of services we're looking to provide on a what are called small cell basis are using much lower power radios. As I mentioned, in some instances, they're using frequencies which will have much less ability to penetrate surfaces. And when we're talking about safety margins on compliance with FCC regulations, we're not measuring each individual radio to ensure that that individual radio complies. We're measuring the cumulative effect of everything on the pole. Any of to the extent we can put, as you said, 5 radios on there, we would measure the cumulative effect of all of that and make sure that all of it in its totality.
Good. So can you share that? Can you share that research and share that data?
At this time, certainly when we start putting up,
No.
at this stage, we don't really
putting up, and it's kind of late, right? So if you guys think that this is safe, right? I'm sorry, I have to get this out because this is a concern, because we have a lot of kids in Sunset Park. I don't want to get irradiated. You talk about cell phone being around for a long time. There is still debate about cell phone giving people cancer in the brain. Okay, so unless you could come out with research right now, right, to show that this is safe, right, then all this talk right now is just talk.
Yeah, well, we certainly can provide some studies that we think will provide a more a balanced view of some of these issues to the community board.
If it's okay, I'm gonna thank you, Jerry. There are a couple of questions that have come in, and I just want to recognize so for context, if you don't know our community and Sunset Park, and it sounds like in terms of talking about a couple of these locations, major hospital, lots of small businesses, like there are people that are there and they're there regularly. And so I mean, I understand Stacy made a point about like, this is our community, we know our community, and just being responsive to that, and thinking about it. And so I want to go, there's a couple questions that have come up that I think Elizabeth, if you don't mind, you're in the public chat, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, Elizabeth Ampere. If you wanted to ask a question about, you've got a couple actually in here about extreme weather events.
Okay, I can do that now. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I see the
great.
mute button. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that these kiosks provide a good opportunity for the community to have access to information. We have experienced some extreme weather events that have been unpredictable, and we're going to experience more. And what I'm hearing is that the new ones that you would be putting up wouldn't have a screen. And so I just wanted to find out whether these kiosks, all of them, would be providing multilingual information to people when there are extreme weather events. And if there is a blackout, will these things continue to operate? Are they on a microgrid, or do they have access to energy that is separate, so that people will have access to that information? And then seriously, I think you need to respond to the request that has been made by a number of people about the environmental implications. I think those are valid questions. We've got children that are autistic and have special needs that are as a result of being in proximity to environmental hazards. And I think that that's worth a response. But thank you so much, Katie.
So as it relates to, I'm sorry, let me make sure I'm unmuted, sorry. As it relates to resiliency, that's a great question. Even without screens, the Link NYC kiosks, so I'm talking about the ones that are proposed and the ones that exist in the ground right now, they have a dedicated 911 button, which means like you don't have to like pick up a phone or start anything, you literally just have to press one button to get to 911. In the event that there is a power outage, and Rob or Margot, feel free to jump in. It's been a while since I've looked at this, but there is an alternative power source, I believe, just for the 911 button, to make sure that folks have access to emergency services, which, you know, obviously if there's a blackout, there could be other incidental things going on. And before I turn it over to them, I'll just say too that for the links that already do exist in your neighborhoods with the screens, they were actually really, really helpful during the COVID pandemic, which, you know, if you remember toward the beginning, especially, the guidance was changing very frequently. And we worked directly with the health department, with the mayor's office, and with our colleagues at Link NYC to make sure that we were able to get those messages out to the community. I also believe we have worked with the city's emergency management folks on stuff like weather alerts, in extreme weather events. So that's just like a sampling of some of the stuff that we've done in relation to emergency services. I don't know, Rob or Margot, if you have anything to add there on that.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things, Stacy. As you said, we do have the 911 service is among the most critical services that the links provide, and it's provided by all of the links, whether or not they're 5G, whether or not they have advertising screens. And there is a dedicated backup service to ensure that the 911 service never goes offline. If the remainder of the link goes offline in an extreme weather event, such as a hurricane or something else, we do work very closely with Con Ed to get the links back up and running as quickly as we can. And we're actually obligated to do so to the city. As far as services go, there will be no advertising screens on the links in your neighborhood. However, there will still be an iPad-esque tablet, which has a screen, and all of the city services that Stacy outlined are available through that tablet. There's just no advertising. So that's how individuals can get information about 311, about where to go in the city to access EBT services, directions, and other conduits. We also make available information about Code Blue and Code Red alerts, which is the city's program for responding to extreme cold or extreme heat. And we're actually in the process of upgrading both of those this year so that they will be more individually helpful depending on which link that you are standing near and using. But in general, all of these services are the types of features that we do like to provide and commit to providing, and they're all available on the tablet of the Link 5G, even for the Link 5Gs that don't have advertising screens.
And I just wanted to add that I did confirm that the three we're proposing, we have a mistake in the presentation I gave you. These are going to be non-ads. So to your question about the extreme weather events, we wouldn't be able to, on at least these three, have any type of display about it. But as Margot mentioned, we do work closely with the city and local community groups for putting up other types of information, including emergency information on the kiosks, which have screens. A certain percentage of our time on the screens is actually dedicated to items that New York City asked us to put in many community districts. That includes the local community districts, which put up information about their meetings and other information that they deem important to folks in their community.
Okay, go to John, Vice Chair, Transportation, and any other community board members if you want to put your hands up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I've got a little bit of feedback and some follow-up questions to some of that. So first, the site at 111 58th Street by Brooklyn Army Terminal. I want to say that for years there was a of the old school Link NYC kiosk. There was one at Brooklyn Army Terminal that never worked for 2 years. So I want to ask you to please make sure that this one works when it goes up, because if it's not functional, that's not good. And especially because that last one was so long with no service. Next, my question was for these tablet ones. So it sounds to me like they will have the same info as on the larger ad screen ones. In addition to ads, though, that includes the information about the buses, and does that include also the ability to do calls? I heard about the 911 button, but they can't make phone calls.
No. They have all the same services as any Link NYC kiosk, except they don't have the advertising screen. So you can make calls. It has the 911 button. It has the free Wi-Fi. It has the charging port, and it has the tablet, which can be used for limited applications. So there's a Maps app. There is an app for finding nearby social services. There's 311. And the tablet is also used for video relay service for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Okay, but will it have the, I know it's not as big, but given what Rob just said about the information about like board hearings and stuff, will that be on there like a screensaver, or is that only on the larger ad kiosk?
That's only on the advertising screens. There's not advertising on the tablet.
Okay, yeah, because that's unfortunate, because I know a lot of people do find information about these important things that way. And I also echo Elizabeth's comments on how useful that can be in extreme events. Do also want to ask one other question about, or actually two other questions. First, are there data caps? If you're putting these in business areas, I could imagine businesses ending up using them as their primary, internet service provider. And then I'll have one final question after you do that.
No, there's no data cap. Basic meaning it's unlimited free Wi-Fi.
Okay, and then the final
just
thing
to
was
measure, it's a full gigabit of service, which, I mean, I can tell you we've put these things out with dozens or in some cases hundreds of people using them, and it's hard to have. This is not like a gigabit service that you see announced or maybe advertised on television where you're essentially sharing it with a bunch of other people. If you go to one of these kiosks and you stand nearby it, you're likely to get, say, 500, depending upon what your device is, you could get 500 or more megabits per second usage out of it. And reality is we do have people, in many cases, businesses, and in some cases, residents who live nearby or work nearby the kiosks, who utilize them in their houses or in their businesses for their own purposes. It doesn't always penetrate buildings, but it does sometimes. We had one instance when we were doing an inventory, and we noticed that people are using it not just for their phones and their computers, but we see that people use it for other devices in their homes from time to time.
And then the last question was, this is probably a Stacy and maybe Brett question. I feel like I could be remembering this wrong, but I feel like the city came a number of years ago, I don't know if it was related to this project or not, and mentioned that there was a plan to add fiber optic under the ground through the FDNY call boxes. Is that still happening? And was that part of this project, or is that something else?
So the call boxes are separate. They're not under our agency's purview. I believe, and I haven't gotten an update on this in a while, and Brett, if you know anything, feel free to chime in, but I believe there was an issue with the union that actually maintained them, which has led to them staying in the ground for as long as they have. But there is significant underground infrastructure. Obviously, you've seen these all over this city that and they're still standing, but probably aren't used very much. But yeah, there's a significant amount of fiber that the city owns. I don't have any further information on what it would be used for in the future, but that's a really great question that I can certainly look into.
I appreciate it.
And the kiosks themselves will be connected to a fiber network. So for this site that you mentioned out on the ferry terminal and the 2 by Bush terminal, we'll have to bring a fiber optic service to those kiosks, similar to the 17 kiosks that exist already in your community district. And whereas City Bridge, we're not really in the business of doing connections to the homes or fiber connections to people's businesses. But, you know, the reality is once we have that fiber built, you know, that makes it easier for businesses or companies that are in that business to, you know, reach new areas of the city where perhaps they're fiber poor and more readily reach, you know, people's homes and people's businesses.
Are there any other questions that have come in from the community board? I'm just seeing if there's any other hands that are up. So just to reiterate that the thing that we're doing tonight as Community Board 7 as the Transportation Committee is being able to capture these concerns and get this feedback. There are a couple asks that have come through that we've captured in our notes. Stacy will send them to you. We have a community board meeting, full community board meeting that's coming up February 15th. So we'll capture some of these. This is feedback that we're going to provide and questions that we'll look for some follow-up on. We have another agenda item, which is loading zones, neighborhood loading zones, which I want to get to. Jerry, I'm happy to give you the question if you wanted to ask it before we move.
Yeah, real quick, right? So what control are we putting in place to prevent people doing illegal stuff using the Wi-Fi? For example, when this first came out a while back, people using the Wi-Fi or using kiosks to go on the phone site. So what kind of control are we putting in place to prevent that from happening?
So thank you for asking, Jerry. So in the first several months of the program, there was internet access on the physical tablet that was on the kiosk. And what we were seeing from that is that folks were pulling up a chair and kind of sitting there all day, which wasn't really what we were trying to achieve with this. So what we ended up doing is cutting unfettered internet access from that tablet. And after that, a lot of the complaints about people hanging out in big groups around the kiosks just plummeted. And you know, those issues are far and few between now. So that's what that issue was. I think that was around 2016. And right now, the internet access is through Wi-Fi only, so people can access whatever they want through their phone or their laptop or tablet or whatever device. We do not filter it in any respect through the network. But because it's an outdoor network and people are free to use it on their own devices, we really haven't seen a lot of folks congregating necessarily around the kiosk itself. And as I said, the tablet is still useful, but it's very limited. You know, you can check out the map, see where you are. You could see where the nearest food pantry is or something like that. We really want people to use it what they need it for and move on because it's a public space.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you everyone from the team, from coming, from City Bridge, and from the city. We will follow up, and we'll shift gears now to talk about our other agenda item. Thank you.
All right, thanks for
Okay.
having us.
Everybody.
Great. All right,
Yeah.
thank you. We're going to try and go quick through this, but at the same time, it's actually a useful conversation to raise to everyone. So thank you for hanging on for this committee meeting. So what we're going to go through is loading zones. I know that there were some people who came specifically, I think, for this conversation. I'm going to try and share my screen again. Give me 1 second as I do that. Sorry. Let me see if the best way to do that is just to share screen, transportation committee. There it is. Okay. All right. And I'll put this into full view. Community Board 7 got a notice from the New York City Department of Transportation. This was back in December, on December 9th, with a notice about neighborhood loading zone proposals. These are the locations that were sent to us: 635 41st Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, 600 44th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, covering 3 spaces. So this, and it means no parking Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I used Google Maps just to figure out where these were. These might be neighbors and friends of yours. You might live here. What these 2 locations look like. So this is at least what Google Maps pulled up. Again, this would be, 2 spaces. And then the other site, this is right across from that entrance on 6th Avenue where the park is. Again, Google Maps, I hope I'm capturing the right street view. 644th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue with 3 spaces. I'm just going to go back. What the request is that these locations serve as dedicated curb space for short-term loading activities like package deliveries by commercial vehicles, loading, unloading of personal vehicles, taxi, pickup, and drop-off. Again, the list of blocks, those are the sites that we just showed everybody for those list of blocks of where they've been installed. And then we were asked to provide feedback. We requested a meeting. We asked DOT to come to the transportation committee to talk about how these sites were chosen, how neighborhood loading zones are working already in our community. Again, understanding some of the methodology, behind it. New York City Department of Transportation has said that they can't come to a committee meeting because they don't have the resources or the ability to come. We think this is important that we create space to be able to get comments and get feedback and have questions be raised. So that's why we wanted to make sure we put it on the agenda as a discussion so we can capture any input that you have. The reason we got this notice from Department of Transportation is because there is a law that regulates this, Local Law 168 from 2021, which just says that there needs to be a public methodology for determining where these loading zones are created since it was implemented. So again, these are the locations for the loading zone proposals. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second, and I can always share in the chat what the locations are. But I just wanted to open it up for any questions that folks might have about this. I see a couple of hands have gone up. So I'm going to go to Diana first.
Yeah, do we know if there's any place where we can find their general process for deciding this stuff? Because these locations just seem totally arbitrary to me.
John, we can just ask this, right? We can ask again how they came up with these locations for our community. That was the question
Or
we had asked them.
At
right?
the very least, what's their process in general? That the local law said that they have to have a public method for choosing this stuff. And if that exists, I'd be interested in it. Like, for example, why are we doing this on a residential street instead of on an avenue? That's like kind of my first question. So anyway,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah,
dig
thank
around
you.
too. I was just wondering if anyone had found that already.
It's a great question. I wish they were here so that they could answer this. This is why we wanted them to, that's why I wanted them to come.
Putting it on the
Great.
record that that's super
Yes.
obnoxious.
Yeah.
So can I add one thing to what Diana just said? So sorry for interrupting. Yeah, as I understand it, they said that there is some law that requires them to install new loading zones, and these are different than the loading zones on avenues. So these are, this program is specifically for residential streets. How they came up with it, I'm not sure. I've heard that that in other districts, people have requested them. I don't know if that's the case for this, but I presume we can ask this question, and that's something we should do.
So then the idea is that these are loading zones for deliveries to residences as opposed to deliveries to businesses? Okay, personally, I don't see why they can't all just use the same loading zones and treat deliveries to residences and deliveries to businesses pretty much the same way. So that's where I am on this.
Okay, Jerry?
Yes, thank you. I'm with her, right? So, I mean, I just putting on the record, I know, you can't answer this. Because I know in Sunset Park, around 8th Avenue, they put in a lot of loading zones. Those loading zones turn into people set up shops on the street, right? So having loading zone, right, is a great idea, but I don't know if it's going to work in the neighborhood. Going back to what they say, why put in residential street if they have a lot of loading zones already in the avenue? It's not for you, it's for them. So that's my question.
Say I just want to make sure we get it for the notes, that last
Okay.
part. If you could just repeat
Yeah.
it again.
Why are we having, like, one, did we did a study, right, on current loading zone in the community? People are not using it, right? People are using it as a storefront, right? Second, if I agree with Diane, if they already have loading zones in the avenue, why do we have it on the commercial street? I mean, I'm sorry, residential street.
Okay, thank you. That was
Thank
helpful
you.
clarification. And I think we might have some neighbors who joined who might have a question or two. So if I could go to comment or a question, but Conrad, sounds like you live there. If you wanted to, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself.
I have to unmute him.
Okay.
I have to give him access to be able to speak. Hold on a moment. I
Okay.
will do that now.
There may be one other neighbor after that I want to.
Okay, so let me just allow him to speak. Okay, he can speak now. He can unmute himself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, okay, so I don't know exactly if there's any criteria here where it would make more sense to put a loading zone in front of an actual large building, because this is a large building and there's often like kind of little miniature traffic jams in front of the building with Amazon trucks and other deliveries. And I know that where this location is, it's like 2 families live in that row house, and it seems like it would be shifting all the loading for this building in front of the wrong location. And I don't know. So it's just, I'm curious, like maybe that's exactly the midpoint of the block, and that was the reason it was chosen. Yeah, so I'm just curious, and I do feel it could be in them at a location. That's it.
Great. Okay. And thank you, Conrad. And then Linda, we see your question, so we can also capture this as part of the feedback that we provide. we're community board volunteers too for transportation, so we're not sure. And again, DOT would be the right people to have here in this meeting to be able to ask them this. Any other comments before we move to close about these loading zone locations? Julio, is there anything you wanted to add? Okay, no problem. All right, so I think we're ready to wrap up. Sorry, Sam, go for it, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. Just concerned with regard to the location of these loading zones. We are in dire need of such zones on Fifth Avenue, where currently, if anybody walks on Fifth Avenue, sees that these delivery trucks just stop right in the middle of the street, all because there is no dedicated type of loading zones. And I would like for us to advocate for more of such zones on Fifth Avenue, where we need them really, really badly. And I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. Yeah, in terms of the location. Okay, that's great. All right. Thank you, everybody, and Natasha and Maria. This concludes the meeting. Appreciate it. We'll bring it to the board meeting on the 15th.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.